Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I wanted to spend a bit of time talking through an RPG developed by Tokyo RPG Factory last summer on PS4, PC and Nintendo Switch. And this game was Oninaki. A word of warning, I've played this game on the Nintendo Switch, which is often met with frame rate drops and slow loading times. However, I've learnt this is not so much the case on PS4 and PC with the recommended specs. It's a hack and slash RPG set in a world where a person dies, still clinging to regrets and desires they are unable to move into the afterlife, but instead become a lost soul amongst the living. We play as a young man named Kagachi, who works for a group known as the Watchers, who assist in the passing of lost souls so they can become reincarnated, as well as fighting monsters that are born out of regret. It's a fairly unique premise which I've not really encountered much, which centres a lot of the game around the concept of belief in reincarnation, where the people in this realm believe once you die and relieve yourself of all harbouring feelings of the living, you can move forward and become reincarnated again. The story itself is, best put, okay. The key points in the story I think are quite interesting. However, the lines of dialogue are not fully voiced, only having starting words from Japanese voice actors only, with little immersion and movement of characters and story scenes. This essentially leaves you to move from one place to the next, experience static story cutscenes, which take away from the interesting story that they're trying to tell. There's a lot of interesting lore, shocking twists, and beautiful artwork that is let down from the lack of character development and an inability to have players resonate with any key players in the story. This makes me think it would have been more interesting to have this as a short story anime instead. The story isn't impressively long either, with the main playthrough of the game only taking about 20 hours to complete. Kagachi possesses the ability to control entities known as demons, who essentially act as different weapon classes which you can switch between as you traverse through dungeons, defeat bosses, and progress through the story. This is essentially where the gameplay is focused. The game has you run around in dungeon-like maps, allowing you to switch between different demons during combat to pull off basic combos and skills to what best suit your position. The key mechanic which differentiates this game from other RPGs is the exploration you do between the two different realms, the world of the living and the spiritual realm. Dungeons have you move between the two different realms, each with their own enemies in order to reach your final point. A great concept which I feel could have definitely been improved on. There's a really big missed opportunity here for puzzles which have you work between the two realms to solve, as well as for some more varying gameplay for when you fight in each realm. Basic attacks are limited to mashing a single button 2 or 3 times, and each demon can only set up 4 different specials, or skills in this case, which each vary in use and aesthetic. The gameplay is pretty simple, however still somewhat fun to play. There's a lot of enjoyment in finding these new demons that you can use and seeing the payoffs from improving each demon in their own progression systems known as skill trees. Skill tree progression also comes with story development for each of your demons, learning about their pasts. Fun at first, but once you realise that every memory unlocked simply features the demon in a white room with a voice actor reading off lines, it gets a little boring. More time spent on showing these environments that they are describing in their dialogues would go a long way to investing the players further into the world and lore, and being less likely to skip these over. The more you fight with a demon, the more skill tokens you pick up, which you can spend on expanding your skill tree, giving you power-ups, new skills, and improved mechanics to fight better. It's almost night and day from first picking up a demon to when you've sunk 10 or 15 tokens into the class to have them be more fun and viable to use in the game. The problem here, however, is the gameplay heavily favours using demons you've already had in order to better fight foes around you. I found towards the latter part of the game that I was finding new demons to use, however was struggling to find space in the party, as only 4 of them can be of any use at any time. By late game, you have to spend a fair bit of time grinding to get tokens for these new demons, for them to be even of any use dealing noticeable damage to fodder enemies, meaning if you can't be asked to grind and just want to progress through the story, you'll most likely stick with the first 3 or 4 demons given to you in the game. This is a massive shame, as the weapon classes of later demons look so interesting to use, but realistically pales in comparison to my sword class, which 2-hit kills most enemies because I've been using it since the start of the game. The game should give these later demons a certain amount of tokens to initially use, so that they can be at least useful as soon as you pick them up. This is all met with another hurdle, which is that enemies are basic in combat and lacking in variety, with the most complex enemies being bigger foes with more power, which are a rarity among the hundreds of fodder which you endlessly fight. And considering that each realm has their own identical map with their own monsters that you need to beat, it quickly becomes repetitive and tedious, as you realise you probably fought about 100 penguin enemies a couple of hours into the game. As for the movement options, each demon allows you to use a different movement option. The sword class lets you dash, spear lets you jump, the axe class lets you block, and so on, which is also another great concept, but the problem boils down to how effective these moves really are when it comes to boss fights and other tough enemies. I found the lag time between attacking and being able to dodge far too long in order to allow for fluid fighting gameplay. Going in for an attack often meant that I had to trade blows with the enemy, and there's not really any alternatives to defeating enemies quickly. This lag can be shortened through the skill tree, but it's not enough to make it as fluid as I'd like it to be. Another lacking feature which bugged me was the inability to move the camera at all in the game, making for some difficult times when the enemy you're trying to kill is downstream, blocking your own character, or slightly off map, making it awkward trying to hit them. It's such an easy fix, and I don't understand why they chose not to implement that feature. I'll end on a higher note by talking about the art direction in this game though. Personally, I think this game is beautiful, with interesting designs used for many of the characters we interact with, as well as charming environments which help with the dungeon exploring. They are somewhat lacking in detail and objects if I'm honest, but the key feature in the game which has you move between the living world and the spiritual world is always fun to do, and I loved the look of the contrast in fighting between the two different realms. I only wish the gameplay could better complement this art style and make better use of these interesting characters and demons we see. On a side note, there's a model viewer in here which makes for a nice added bonus. I'm always a fan of monster books and galleries where you can review and admire the enemies and characters you've met so far, and Oninaki's gallery mode is as good as any. But that really sums it though. A great concept which falls short in execution. The uniqueness and the story of the world were enough to keep me going until completion, coupled with the extensive and engaging progression system. But this needs to be accompanied with more exciting enemies, greater variety in maps, and more user-friendly options in gameplay to be truly called a great game. It was initially on the Switch for £40, which in no way I would recommend, but I managed to pick it up on the eShop for sale for half price, which I think I can justify. If you manage to see it for cheap, I'd say it's worth picking up and seeing if the story is to your taste. There's even a demo you can download first, which allows for you to get better understanding on if the game is for you or not. I'd choose PS4 over Switch if you have the choice, but if not, I think it's still entertaining on the Switch, despite the frame rate issues here and there. I'd honestly love for them to make a sequel with improvements that I mentioned in this review, as I think they could bump themselves up to a somewhat alright game to a great game. But that's it here from me today guys, thanks a lot for listening. Let me know if you've played Oninaki and what your thoughts on it are. If you liked this video, please feel free to leave a like or subscribe, and as always, stay tuned for more reviews on movies, anime and video games. Until next time guys, take care. Bye bye.